Okay, before I get into this video and talk about pretty much all the issues with skateboarding in the Olympics and honestly, like why it's just kind of crazy, I'm going to say that I think skateboarding is amazing for the, no, vice versa, but also vice versa. Olympics is amazing for skateboarding because it's going to bring a lot of money into skateboarding. It's going to put a lot of eyes on skateboarding. It's going to make it more mainstream, which, oh, boo hoo hoo, but also more skate parks. That sounds great. Probably more understanding people when you're trying to street skate and get a clip or whatever you're doing. They'll probably be less of a dick to you. Because when I grew up, if you skateboard, it automatically assumed you're a drug addict. Now, if you skateboard, maybe you are trying out for the Olympics. Maybe you're trying to get on a Wheaties box. I have no idea what they're thinking, but I think it's going to be less frowned upon. That's great. More money going into it, which means your favorite pro skater won't have to have a second, third, and fourth job. And maybe, who knows, something crazy like health insurance or a retirement plan or something that'll see them to the other side of when they turn 26 and can't jump downstairs anymore. With the very rare exceptions of skaters like, Leo Romero and Andrew Reynolds, who can still jump and be the best that they ever were. But anywho, getting off track. Skateboarding has had, in the very beginning with the Olympics, there was drama because I don't know how familiar you are with the way the Olympics works, but usually there's either A, qualifying events that lead up to picking who's going to be in the Olympics. Usually countries will hold contests or competition, and the winners of that will be the ones who get into the Olympics, or they will hire an Olympic coach, and that Olympic coach will handpick who they want to be in the Olympics, or they'll just use world rankings like in other contests, or perhaps they will have a tryout and then they will be selected by a committee. Skateboarding decided to just try like a bunch of them. So skateboarding, we did have a skateboard coach for United States and all the other countries, and they just picked teams. But then it came out that like, oh, well, also you have to rank in these contests. So there's this weird in between, like, what are we doing? Where it's like, okay, here's America's team. Here's who we picked for the team. But if they don't rank in the top whatever, then they're not in the contest. It just all got a little bit confusing, and I sort of understand how it ended up, but it was just like, why are they making things so complicated? I don't know. Maybe there's another sport out there in the Olympics that's just as complicated, but it was really stupid. Anywho, pretty rocky start to skateboarding being in the Olympics, but the main issue with skateboarding being in the Olympics is that it's an Olympic sport, like, to be judged. The only like skateboarding thing that makes sense to judge that I think is like cut and dry and isn't like subjective, it's a game of skate. The reason that is because there's an obvious winner or loser. Like a person does a trick and the other person lands the trick. Therefore, you go to the next trick. There's no like, well, I don't like heel flips as much as kick flips, so I'm going to give a half a point less for the kick flip than the heel. Like, that's left out. The only part of it that's slightly subjective is like if someone lands something sketchy, which I imagine the Olympics, there'll be a rule where it's like no toe drag, like it has to be solid, like it's very cut and dry rules. Maybe no do-overs. I doubt they'd copy the barracks rules. It'll probably be something more strict. That's what I imagined in my fantasy world where the Olympics has skateboarding. It doesn't. But skateboarding is so ridiculously subjective. It's like whoever the judges like are probably going to be more likely to win. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the movie Tanya where she was getting low scores because they didn't like her outfit and stuff like that. And whether that's 100% true or not, I don't know. But it sounds very realistic, as well as like things with like gymnastics and anything that is subjective like that. Why is that an Olympic sport? Like it seems, in my opinion, kind of like bullshit. Now with gymnastics, there's a lot of like points on like technique and the way something is done, and a lot of the people in gymnastics are doing the same maneuvers, whereas in skateboarding there are so many more maneuvers to choose from. There are so many variations. There's grinds and slides and flips and like gaps and what have you, manuals. There's like a bazillion different ways to go about it. So it even gets more convoluted and more subjective because there's not only skaters who like this trick more than that trick, there's skaters who like this kind of skating more than that kind of skating. Like, oh, he did a crooked grind nollie flip out. I kind of like the manual 360 flip out more because I'm a manual skater. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure the Olympics did their due diligence to get an unbiased committee of judges. I don't know if they actually did that or not, but I'm assuming they did. But also going into that, like, skateboarding, I think a little bit more so than a lot of the other sports is, what did he just say that skateboarding is a sport? In the Olympics, skateboarding is a sport. This type of skateboarding is a sport. Contest skaters, that's a sport. People want to play you in skate all the time, they're playing you in a sport. I'm sorry, it's competitive, it's a sport. Suck a dick. I don't know what to tell you. Skateboarding in general is just like so, gosh dang, opinionated. All the way down to like there's skaters who are literally better than everyone else who don't have a career in skateboarding, therefore don't even get a chance to compete in one of these qualifiers because the qualifiers for the Olympics were usually invite only. They're not usually open to the public to go like try to go into the contest. Like I'm not going to get into one of these contests. I did Do Tour years ago and it's because someone got me into it. And then even then there was hoops for me to jump through. There's like a lot of just like crappy like handshaking and knowing the right people. Like to get into the Olympics for skateboarding, it actually isn't the best of the best. The best of the best, those skaters, I'm not saying that they don't have maybe a lot of the best skaters in there. No, I take that back. They don't have a lot of the best skaters in there, but they do have some of the best skaters in there. I don't think anyone would argue that Shane O'Neill and Nigel Houston are some of the best skaters in the world. People like Jagger Eaton, though, would have an advantage because he's what is known as kind of, and he's not going to like this, not that he watched this video, but as like a contest skater. Yes, he put out a street part. Yes, there was some good stuff in there. Yes, he switchback Smithed Hollywood 16. Super great. Doesn't change the fact that he is a contest skater for the most part. The majority of his career takes place in a 1 minute time frame or some sort of jam session. I'm sorry, that's where his career mostly takes place. As far as I know, he's only put out that one video part. Maybe he's put out some smaller video parts. I haven't seen them. And those skaters will have an advantage because of the contest format. It's not showing the best of skating. In my opinion, the best of skating is a lot more complicated. The best of skating isn't what you can do in this time period or in this crunch time. The best of skating takes place in what you can do in general. Real Street X Games is the closest thing that I have seen to an authentic skateboarding competition as realistic as possible, where it doesn't really matter who's on their best day and who's on their worst day. The big issue with that, though, of course, is once again subjectivity, and it's like, oh, he did a trick on the East Coast, it doesn't really translate. Like people, like let's say, I don't know, Ashad Ward was back in Philadelphia and he tried to film a real street. He's going to be at an extreme disadvantage to Shane O'Neill, who lives, I think he lives in like the Valley, and he can just drive like an hour in any direction and have like amazing spots. So even that has its issues. But skateboarding in the Olympics also has the park side of things, which might be the not fairer side of the contest. I don't know, same rules apply to that as far as like bias. Like personally, I like lip tricks a lot. If I was a judge and someone did like a really long backside tail slide around a corner, I would probably, as unbiased as I would try to be, score that a little bit higher than someone doing some sort of air trick that is equal to the same difficulty as said backside tail slide. But I don't know, that's just my own opinion. I'm a sucker for lip tricks, and I don't really care to see grown men flying through the air, grown women flying through the air, grabbing and tweaking. To me, that's just not that exciting. When people do a big ollie and they don't grab, I can kind of relate to that because it's sort of streety, but it's so out of my realm though, because it's on something so big transition-wise that I'm just like, oh wow, like what a cool feeling that is. Like whenever I do a backside ollie on like a little hip at a skate park, I'm like, yeah, that was great. And so when I see someone do a big one, once again, I'd be like, score high. Super biased. I wish that they would just do the game escape, but we're going to get into some more drama with the Olympics. Some little insider information. People are officially taking this crazy serious. I remember hearing stories, I think I saw maybe a Dateline or something like that, where they were raising kids to do gymnastics like super early on, like making them real flexible, like basically, as soon as they could crawl, they were cartwheeling those little kids. Like, they were trying to get them ready for the Olympics as soon as possible. And that has already started with skateboarding. There has already been footage coming out of, like, these fetuses, these flying fetuses, these bred to shred children that are basically being pushed into the skateboarding world against their will because they don't have a will to skateboard yet. I'm not saying that like when a kid wants to skateboard and he's young and your parents buy him a board and they take him to the contests and they buy him everything that he wants skateboarding wise, that is not what I'm talking about. I think that's awesome. That is just a very, very supportive parent. of their child's hobby. Same, no one would bat an eye if some kid was doing soccer practice and his dad bought him all the, I don't know, soccer stuff, which would be like, I don't know, cleats and goal and stuff like that. More stuff, I guess, for skateboarding. But anywho, that's cool. But like the forcing your kid to skateboard is insane. I see these kids at skate parks with their dads like yelling at them and like wanting them to skate more. And I cover that subject in a much more detailed version in a video called, I think it's called This Dad Something Skateboarding, blah, blah, blah. The thumbnail is a kid board sliding a rail, and I have the rail highlighted blue. And I'll link it in the bio. There you go. Problem solved. And that is becoming a lot more prevalent, which happens with just more accepted, quote unquote, sports. So I think skateboarding is being divided into this. Okay, now there's skateboarding as I knew it, or as you knew it, for the most part. I mean, the contests have always been around. And then now this much broader, like, oh, there's like money to be made on advertising and whatever, just like every other sport. So people are pouring more money into it. I mean, I just watched Alexis Sablone have a Powerade ad where she was like, I'm partnering with Powerade, blah, blah, blah. And Alexis Sablone is like, in my opinion, like a very, core skater who's super down for skating and like helps out with the community. And it's just like, I watched that ad and I was just like, dude, that is the sickest thing ever. Like, she's getting this fat paycheck for having a really good heel flip, basically. And it's coming from a place outside of skateboarding, which is, not that much money to be made in skateboarding. And it has way more to do with how cool you are these days than it is how good you are at skateboarding. And that's exciting. And that's something that the Olympics is bringing that I'm excited about. It's starting to matter how good you are at skateboarding again. And I think that's going to bring it more to the forefront. So there's probably going to be a separation of like, these are the best skateboarders and they're athletes. And then here's everyone else who's just skateboarding. And I can't really think of too many other activities other than skateboarding in the Olympics that's happening. People play soccer and they play pickup games, or football and pickup games, and they have their fun leagues. And that's definitely a thing. But not to the extreme level that skateboarding is, where skateboarding is like this diehard lifestyle, as corny as that sounds, where it's like there's a whole culture to it and a whole whatever to it, and that's gonna, in my opinion, end up being very separate from this other side of skateboarding, which if you want money, you're gonna want to go over here. And I'm a YouTuber, so I'm like up here getting money, and I'm trying to like pull a little bit of money from here if I can, but like also pull some money from here, and then also there's already YouTube money up here. Actually, where I am up here, that's where you want to be. That's where the good money is. That's where the fatty meat is. Going into another thing that I've heard about the Olympics that I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to say anything to out anyone, but there's been people practicing at these pre-qualifiers in contests and stuff like that, and their coaches are telling them to snake the other people on the course to A, possibly hurt them, B, to take their turn so they don't get to practice their lines, or C, to mentally psych them out. That is what skateboarding on the Olympics level can very much turn into, even more so in the near future. I guess 4 more years. I think it's every 4 years. And that is crazy. Like, even in skateboarding contests, because I used to skate contests all the time, and I always had fun. It was like, a skate contest when I was growing up was like, hey man, like all my friends here, like let's see who wins. Oh man, I hope I win and I get that $200 paycheck, or like, that free skateboard. And it wasn't that competitive. No one was really that bitter. Like, if the person who won didn't deserve to win, no one even really batted too much of an eye, except for the person in second and third place who were just like, I should have won. But other than that, everyone was like, well, that was the contest. That was fun. And then there's a product throwaway, and then everyone's happy. So the Olympic side, though, not so much. It is getting very serious. We are seeing sides of skateboarders that you would have been cooped out of the skate park if you would have been pulling that crap that they're pulling, 5 years ago, much less like 20 years ago or 15 years ago. I mean, you get punched in the face if you're snaking everyone too much a couple years ago. And now it's just like, I could see like, people snaking everyone just to not get a YouTube video, which is a totally acceptable way to snake everyone. If you do that, you know what, you're great and you're right, and you should definitely do that. But people will be like, oh, he's just practicing for a contest. Or they might think to themselves, I'm practicing for the, skateboard qualifier coming up, so I'm just going to go in front of everyone. And there's going to be a much more jockey attitude towards skateboarding. Even though skateboarding has already had this jockey gatekeeper attitude for a while, it's going to be that jockey gatekeeper attitude in the actual jock world, which in my opinion is just god dang hilarious. Skateboarding, I don't think is any less pure than it ever was. Skateboarding will always be the same thing that it was the first time I stepped on a skateboard in my cousin's garage. That's not changing. And I know a lot of people are kind of bummed about like, you know, it going so mainstream and blah, blah, blah. I'm pointing out all these like negative things just to point them out and be like, hey, this is all going on. But guess what? Skateboarding's not changing. Skateboarding's not going anywhere. Going out with your friends and learning your silly tricks is still going to be there, or going out and filming your video part and trying to jump on that big rail is still going to be there. And, you know, maybe there'll even be more money in that than there was before now that more corporate sponsors are coming in, because Lord knows that skateboarders can't run fucking companies. I mean, if they could, then maybe, you know, skaters would actually be making a halfway decent amount of money the past like 10 years, but that's not the case. Skaters didn't start making real money until Nike and Red Bull and all those guys started piling in. So as much as you hate it, it's not selling out, it's cashing in. You know, in order to sell out, that means you have to compromise your own beliefs. And I don't know too many people whose beliefs is, oh, I don't want to get paid. Now I want to go in a little further into how the skateboarding contest, the way that the Olympics was selected, just hasn't really been that fair. I mean, obviously, with the Olympics, it's supposed to be the best of the best. And in this case of skateboarding, it is not the best of the best. But politics have played into it just as much as, well, politics itself. For example, I've heard stories of people not taking their runs so that their friends can rank higher to end up being in the qualifiers, which is pretty wild, to not just keep someone in the qualifiers because they might, I heard one reason that the reason they did it was because they thought that the person was judged poorly, even though they should have been judged better. Or I also heard a story that they didn't want this other person to qualify for the contest. They wanted to keep him out of the contest because they just didn't like him because that said skater is not like the cool skater. And I could definitely see both of those things happening. Both of them seem very realistic. I'm not going to name any names. You can look up the story, though. You can find it very easily just by searching. The fact that like skateboarding politics has already played into like Olympic politics and who's in it and who's not, it just shows that it's like not this like really honorable, amazing thing that it's supposed to be. But guess what? It's probably every sport. By that definition, I bet you every single sport in the Olympics is rigged to some extent. In fact, I would argue that every single sport in the Olympics is rigged to a much further extent than I even know. I'm sure that's totally possible. If not, that's cool, I guess, but it's possible. And so that's my little rant. You know, take what you want from it. Those are the issues that I've seen with the Olympics and the problems that it's going to cause. And if you agree or disagree, by all means comment, because I know there's a ton of stuff that I missed, and I'm totally possible that I was wrong about some of my opinions. Totally willing to be like, oh yeah, I didn't think of it that way. So if you feel like you know something that I misinterpreted or that I'm missing out on or that I misunderstood, by all means, leave a comment. I know there's some people who probably are going to watch this video that have a better understanding of the way other sports work in the Olympics, or maybe they've seen something like this similar happen to another sport in the Olympics. Yeah, let me know what happened with that. Maybe you're a gymnast and you can shed some insight on that as well. Maybe there's more parallels to skateboarding and gymnastics than I actually think. Most of my other videos are me skating with my friends and, I don't know, talking a lot of shit, which I kind of did in this video. But yeah, if you want to subscribe or go watch some of my other videos, by all means, go do it. Yeah, that's really it.